Bleach always has had a unique place in my ever-increasing critical heart. It's a series filled with awesome character designs, excellent art, flashy fights, unique abilities, setting, and even some unique plot aspects. A real winning formula for the shonen genre. And looking at the numbers, Bleach overall was a winning series. Bleach was one of the first anime I ever watched. I look back on it fondly, but within that fondness there's also disappointment and frustration, knowing that the series could have given so much more. I'm not talking about episode count, chapters, arcs, but depth. Bleach, for the most part, is not deep, or at least, does not take the time to present itself as such. While there are various factors I could focus on in this video, such as plot, setting, quality of writing, and other things, the two things I'd like to focus on for this video are the power system and supporting characters. So, let's get started with the power system. The power system introduced in Bleach is multifaceted, with tons of unique and interesting aspects, yet most parts remained underutilized. And aspects that get attention usually just grant a straight up buff of power or speed, your typical shonen stuff, resulting in many fights feeling like two bulldozers ramming against each other to see which one's standing at the end, which is pretty cool in its own merit, but doesn't leave much in the way of strategy, resourcefulness, or wit. They will collide, and the stronger will be left standing. Bleach fights stand as one of its greatest strengths, and while they're awesome to watch or read, I think they also represent one of its greatest failures. How underutilized such a magnificent power system is. In the Bleach universe, the system is called Ryoku. I probably butchered that, but let's move on. Which is in essence what everyone calls
spirit pressure.
All spirits and humans have Ryoku, and with enough of it, they develop abilities. For today, let's just focus on Soul Reapers. Soul Reapers utilize Zanpakutō to draw out their abilities, which have three main forms: Base, Shikai, and Bankai. Base appears as a katana, Shikai is an initial awakening method, granting unique form and abilities, and Bankai is a fully awakened version of the blade, increasing spiritual pressure up to 10 times and providing different abilities. These transformations are awesome. Shikai and Bankai can be so vastly different at times that one may be more beneficial to use in one situation than the other. With Bankai, boosting one's power so much is appealing, but also places incredible strain on the body and eats through one's spiritual pressure much quicker than Shikai would. Case in point, the first time Ichigo used it in combat, he was literally being crushed by his own spiritual pressure output. While the strain can be lessened with mastery, the rampant consumption of spiritual pressure cannot. So, it's a gamble as you don't know how long a fight may drag out. Also, you might not know the abilities of your enemy. What if your Shikai works better? Should you try to draw out their abilities without showing everything in your hand? How much spiritual pressure do they have? What if... And this level of depth is never explored outside of the Soul Society arc. Shikais, in almost every case, serve to show just how quote-unquote strong a villain is. But the main problem with that is usually led by someone with a notoriously weak Shikai. Looking at you, Renji. The uniqueness and flexibility of Shikais is completely disregarded. Everyone jumps immediately to Bankai if they have one, save for a few unique cases. And the repercussions of using Bankai? Never really explored. When people do run out of spiritual pressure, it's usually at a really convenient time, such as the end of a fight, or when reinforcements arrive, or a power-up happens, or something like that. To use one's Shikai in most cases is trolling, which is really sad to see all the unique abilities and designs go to waste. What's even worse is considering that many of the characters in the series don't have access to Bankai, and in most cases they're there just for decoration, except for Kenpachi and a couple other captains that have really strong Shikais. Anyways, moving on. The effects of making Shikai irrelevant also hurts the uniqueness of Bankai, because it cheapens the ability. Bankai becomes the new starting point of strength in the series, rather than a special ability. Remember the first time Ichigo used Bankai? The series had been building up to this moment, and when it came, a massive culmination of spiritual pressure surrounded him. Waves of dust ripped through the air as his power shifted and even culminated in a tornado before dissipating. After witnessing his strength, even Byakuya, his enemy, shows him respect. It was a monumental achievement. And all that literally means nothing by the following arc. His Bankai is rendered completely ineffective. Does he train to master his Bankai more and refine his skills? No. He moves on to the next power. The only time in a series when Bankai means something is when someone uses it for the first time, or it's an evolved version of their Bankai that they achieved, probably off-screen. Just like Shikai means nothing, Bankai has lost a majority of its significance. It doesn't feel all that special, because there's no point in fighting with a Shikai, so just use Bankai. Alongside this underutilization of Shikai is that of Kidō, a spell system Soul Reapers use that literally has boundless potential. Seals, weapons, energy blasts, explosions, shields, teleportation, producing light, healing, telepathy, and so much more. There's literally so much here to the point where I'm constantly discovering new spells as I research. These spells each have different classifications and rankings. Each classification has a list of 99 different spells that are ranked accordingly on the list. The higher up the list, the more difficult the spell is. Each spell has a chant and effectiveness that depends on the spiritual pressure and mastery of the individual casting it. Even a rank 1 spell can be deadly in the hands of someone with a ton of spiritual pressure and skill. A master of these spells can even cut the chant to a phrase, shortening the cast time but reducing effectiveness. Now, just imagine with me for a moment a Soul Reaper, capable of Flash Step, having Bankai, and now having an arsenal of spells that would put frickin' Dumbledore to shame. It's a mage capable of close-range combat through their Zanpakutō and moving at speeds of light with hundreds of spells at their arsenal. That sounds so broken, it would be so frickin' awesome to see fully realized or even just partially realized. You could have Soul Reapers that have shortcomings with their Zanpakutō and cover those weaknesses with their utilization of Kidō, or master specific spells to complement their fighting style. Soul Reaper v Soul Reaper fights would be so vastly interesting as they try and figure out Zanpakutō abilities and which spells the other is capable of and how to counter, or even having an Arrancar aware of the Kidō system and wary of what a Soul Reaper might unleash. And we only get to see the most minute taste of this terrific magic system throughout the series. It's a freaking surprise when someone uses this system, like, why? Imagine if in Harry Potter everyone had Zanpakutōs and the abilities that came with them, but rather using their wand and Zanpakutō, or maybe one or the other depending on the situation, everyone just used their wand. And occasionally, once every dozen fights or so, someone would pop Bankai, throw out a single massive move, and then put it away like nothing happened. You would have everyone that reads the series question, why does everyone have a Zanpakutō if it's almost never used? The abilities appear to be incredibly powerful and unique, why do only a handful of people actually use this? And that's how I feel about Kidō and Bleach. It plays such a backseat role in the series, it's almost forgettable. How would the story have changed if Ichigo, rather than pursuing abilities that just buff his speed or power, actually explored this spell system and developed as a Soul Reaper while refining his Shikai and Bankai abilities? It could have led to world building, exploration of Soul Society, what it means to be a Soul Reaper, and a level of depth to the combat of Bleach I feel it's always been missing. I have much more I could say about the power system in Bleach, but this is starting to get long, so let's move on. Side characters. Side characters piss me off in this show. Specifically, those that have the most amount of screen time. So this does not apply to captains or any of the antagonists. Side characters are criminally trivialized in this series. Practically spectators alongside the reader rather than components involved in the story. And I'm not even just talking about in terms of strength, but agency as well. And that wasn't the case in the beginning of the series. Let's first look at Orihime. If Orihime was released by a MacGuffin capable of healing any injury, and any other side character was kidnapped by Aizen, would the story really change all that much? Her impacts on the characters and story itself are negligible. Even her romance with Ichigo is severely underdeveloped, and the entirety of it is just her one-sidedly gushing over him. Her scenes of development are normally intertwined with this romance as well. Not really her personal development, but how she feels about Ichigo and his relationships with the people around her. Everything she does in one way or another is for Ichigo. If everything is done for someone else, how are we supposed to know who you are? She has quirks and traits, but not really a character. At the start, she was given a backstory and a stake of what happened to her and her brother, and once that arc wraps up, she just becomes a classic female shonen protagonist that has to have a romance with the main character and not much of anything else. Or look at Chad. Tell me, what can you tell me about Chad? He's Mexican, supposedly tough, and is quiet. What are some of his hobbies or ambitions? What does he think about Soul Society or Soul Reapers or, heck, the Quincy Slaughter? Does having hollow powers bother him? Can you really tell me any of that? He doesn't even have proper relationships with the other characters outside of Ichigo. What would he talk about with anyone else in the cast besides something that's going on with the plot? And he's not the only one. Most character relationships are primarily with Ichigo. Very few seem to have developed relationships with other characters. Chad had so much to work with. He's a Mexican giant living in Japan who was bullied for his size and strength. A rough around the edges adolescent who hurt others while his grandfather did his best to teach him about kindness and humility. Lessons he didn't learn until after his grandfather passed, leaving him alone and so filled with guilt that he didn't listen to him while he was still alive. He started to refuse to fight back, which made him even more of a target for bullying. He's suddenly cast into this other world of danger, of hollows and soul reapers, and given the strength to fight alongside the one person who's had his back. What will he choose to do with these powers? How will he change? Has he become a person his grandfather can actually be proud of? These are questions that the series could have asked, but never really does. Chad simply exists as a perfectly loyal friend that does whatever Ichigo needs him to do. His fights and inclusions are low stakes, and never have any impact on the sway of the plot. He just kind of exists. He's the most mishandled character in the series. Or at least that's what I'd like to say, but I completely forgot about Kon while writing the script. He has it even worse than Chad. These statements I made about Chad and Orihime I could also make about Renji, who was once a threatening antagonist reduced to a trivial side character where his entire impact on the story could be watered down to him slightly helping. His character has literally become the Emerald Splash of Bleach. Even Uryu and Rukia, who were once pivotal characters that challenged Ichigo, progressed the plot, and held agency, drifted into the background role after Soul Society arc until nearly the end of the series. In the beginning of the series, Uryu in many ways was stronger than Ichigo. He had a solid foundation of backstory, motivation, and flaws. A rival with unique abilities and goals capable of battling strong opponents. For a short while, the entire plot revolved around him and his choices. While Orihime and Chad were pulled around by just wanting to help Ichigo even more than wanting to save Rukia, Uryu was different. Sure, he couldn't stand by as someone he knows was executed, but there was more than that for him. He had been humiliated, completely bested by a Soul Reaper, those he despised. And now he had the opportunity to go to their home base and fight loads of them, save Rukia, and get a semblance of revenge? He was hardly there for Ichigo. In Soul Society, his actions bear weight. In an interesting twist, he was the first to actually fight a captain head-on, arguably one of the most dangerous ones. Captain Mayuri, the man who tortured and experimented on captured Quincy's before ultimately executing them. And Uryu fights not just him, but his lieutenant as well, while facing down the first Bankai introduced in the series. This moment had nothing to do with Ichigo or saving Rukia. All the attention was on Uryu and his revenge. He sacrifices everything, all of his future power in order to kill Mayuri and manages to defeat him, only for Mayuri to escape. His revenge left unfinished. This was genuinely a fantastic portion of Bleach. Uryu's hunt for the captain has begun. Surely he will go on a journey to kill that monster. And this storyline is practically never touched again. Uryu never makes any attempt at Mayuri and just shows a general dislike for him. Like he's an annoying coworker that took his lunch from the fridge one too many times. He's even eventually helped by Captain Mayuri, and the scenes around it are practically played for jokes. Why are these characters so outrightly disrespected? Uryu regains his abilities, but they are so insignificant compared to before they falls in line with Orihime, Chad, Renji, and Rukia at being sidelined characters until the final arc of the series. This man who is strong enough to take on Bankai does little of note for over half the series. Finally, in the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, his presence is required again and he gets to be a proper character. But he's been irrelevant for so long that everything feels so cheapened to me. His character doesn't resonate anymore. While there are countless unique and awesome characters in Bleach, very few have any depth beyond their design and surface-level personality. The series hints at depth with its characters, but hardly takes the time to reveal its hand on the matter. I know I've ragged on Bleach a lot this video, but I genuinely love this series. I grew up with it, and that holds a special place to me. I still catch myself rewatching some of my favorite fights in the series or tuning into the 1,000-Year Blood War arc. I'm frustrated at Bleach because I feel it could have given so much more, but didn't. I think it could have gone down as one of the greatest shonen that ever existed if it expounded upon its building blocks. But as it stands now, it'll just be remembered fondly. And I'll continue to remember it fondly, despite my many gripes with the series. Thanks for watching my video to the end. I'll be perusing the comments, so let me know your thoughts down below. Consider subscribing and sticking around, and I'll catch you next time.